I'd love to talk a little bit more about like file performance if we can. Some ideas there. I'm just going to add that. And what other agenda items would people like to add today?
I think I'll go with whatever y'all have because I won't be able, I probably won't make it that far. But I mean, if we could talk about the reports that are being generated for tests right now, that would be useful to me just to get a gauge on the current. I have some concerns of my own, so.
I don't know what that means.
For the testing framework, report tests.
All right. Oh, did we lose Lily?
No,
Sorry,
if we don't do mine,
notice.
if we don't do mine earlier on, we won't get to mine. So it doesn't have to be the first thing, but if like validation is short, maybe we can do that then.
I have a feeling validation will be short because while it would have been like useful for me to just be at the last two back-end meetings, like I think I eventually figured out what y'all had been trying, or like what the purpose of the push was. It just took a few back and forths, I think. And okay. Like I still hold that it's not super use. It's one of those things of like, it feels like it might be a good thing, but I don't actually know like how many people are like getting annoyed by it. But I guess it's one of those of like, oh, if people are actually getting annoyed by it, then we should just we should honestly just have like a separate, you need to update your thing as opposed to like here, upload your YAML file that was generated from the Weaver, and we bring you straight to like the end review page or something that you can change things, as opposed to having to go through the whole process again. Because that's really, if that sort of sounds like what that use case is for, but that's like one of those perfect is the enemy of good. So I'm fine with having that button there. As long as like, I wasn't sure, it sounded like the primary thing was like, oh, it's very difficult for us to like go, like have to go through all these different screens, which just didn't seem like the right reason. But that was what really the primary thing I just needed to figure out. So yeah, no, thanks for like explaining things to me, Lily. Sorry, it took like several back and forths for me to understand, but.
Oh, okay, so it sounds like we might have closed the loop on that one then. I think I'm okay with us trying it out and seeing what happens with it too. It doesn't have to be the end of the discussion for sure.
Sure, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't actually know if I like made a ticket for what I just talked about of making a like review, like straight to review option for the Weaver, or if that's like makes sense to think about and add.
What would that be like? So are you saying like with it's a way to edit the YAML file essentially?
Yeah, because essentially like there are, from the one thing I like is that, yeah, there are two ways that people like use the Weaver. It's you actually have nothing and you want to get an interview, and then it's, oh crap, I like needed to rename a bunch of fields in my PDF and like maybe change a few like questions or selections that I did in the Weaver. So let me just like redo the, I guess like, okay, if you're changing stuff to PDF, it's fine. Or that still like would be front to back Weaver. But then there's also like, oh, I just need to change a few small things in the interview, and I am new to DocuSimple, and so I don't quite know where to go. So I'm just going to go through the Weaver again to change those few things. And that's the one that feels like you should be able to upload your YAML. It doesn't have to be exactly what we spit out, but we could try and like reorganize the structure of the YAML into what we would spit out, and then just.
I would say we just, I mean, like, yeah, that's a like whole other thing, right?
It's definitely
Yeah,
a
no,
bigger
I agree.
project for sure.
Yes, agreed.
It's not doable, but it might be a better fit for a different tool than the Weaver. Although at least we should develop that code separately. That doesn't mean that there shouldn't be one interface for it. I think we figured out one interface is good for stuff, especially for well.
Mhm.
But we might actually have a ticket for it already. Let me just take a quick peek before we move on, because it's always good to open tickets right away. Let's see what it would be called. Oh, this is the wrong package. Our backlog is definitely getting bigger. Let's see. Okay, well, I can't find it, but I do think we had a ticket for it at one point. Maybe we closed it as like a won't fix.
Mhm.
So I should just make sure. There's too many things to find it there, actually. Well, why don't I open up a new ticket for it, and I'll just say possible duplicate.
Okay.
So we can think about it. I mean, I think one thing we definitely would want to, that would benefit from that workflow is updating the review screen. Because I just find the review screen so tedious to make, but it's inevitable you're going to change stuff when you're editing it.
Mhm.
So it feels like the Weaver might be a good place for that, for an enhanced version of the review screen generator that I made a while ago, which takes advantage of all of the things that combine fields and screens, and is just better. Okay. All right, so I think that closed that one. Michelle, I just don't know what you mean by reports that are being generated for tests, but let's talk about that next.
So at the end of your test, when you run it in GitHub, you can go to the action. You can see what's been logged, and there will be a report, whether it succeeded or failed. We have made a report that logs stuff about the tests you ran. And so, you know, obviously it could just say, hey, good job, right? Or like, have a nice Friday. But it doesn't. It, you know, tries to give you useful information about the report. And we are currently trying to, it was giving okay information, but not very like actionable information or like good exploratory information. We're hoping that's like improved now. So reviewing a report like that, what's going on?
I'm going to try to find one where we can actually see it.
Well, yeah, I mean, I will show you
So
one where you can actually see it. That was the plan. So,
Yeah,
but you can't see it in there because you don't have our current version.
I just sent a link in the chat that Michelle had sent me yesterday.
Yeah.
That I had been saving until I got a chance to look at, which I guess is now.
All right, why don't you share your screen, Michelle, since it's something you want to demo.
Okay. So. This is, I don't know if this is the one that Bryce was looking at, but this is the latest one. So under run test, we've got which made testing tests. Oh no, I see, right. That's not in here. It's in here, cool. I was like, why is there only one test in here? That would be just crazy, and it is. So under npm run test, these you can ignore because these are for the testing framework. I mean, they're all for the testing framework, but those are the unit tests and people won't usually have those. And here are the reports. So it will say, and this is available as a text file as well to download in a different place. So here is, you know, the title. And then for each scenario, you have that scenario like description plus some tags that you added. I think these have to be, that's funny, huh? I gave 3 scenarios the same name. Oh no, I see what happened. Never mind, that's fine. It gets rid of digits right now, that's fine. Okay, so you have the scenario and its description. Then you have the page ID, whatever variables were set for the page ID, which right now, these are not included in that. So for example, field code mix, the page ID with field code mix had this variable set to this variable set to this value. And so on and so forth. The ones up there are actually ones we're still developing, but this is a good example of one that has been more fully developed.
All right, so yeah, let us know, what's the question, Michelle? This looks
So
pretty-
yeah, I mean, one of the questions is this useful information? Is it presented in a useful way to tell someone what has been going on? Like what the steps the test ran through to help them understand if something goes wrong, what might have gone wrong.
I think it's going to be hard for us to really estimate that here, but looking at it like just in this minute here, yeah, I mean, it seems.
So
Yeah.
what I think the key point, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No. I think you're probably going to help direct us.
Yeah, my only experience with this is I did when I was like helping out with Caroline's the DVD, the Dead Broke Dad's interview is like there was some of the cucumber testing stuff in there. I like couldn't get it quite finished because it was a long enough interview that it timed out every time. But I at least had to go through a few times of like, oh, this failed, and I couldn't quite figure out why. Does it say like where if it, I guess none of these tests are failing, and so it's hard to tell what would get shown if it fails. Like if it can't set
Right.
a field to the right value, does it show what it tried to set it to? Does it show like what it actually got set to? Where will it stop? Will it stop on the screen before? If it like can't, like if there's some server error on the next screen, when it tries to submit that next screen, does it show that next ID, or does it only show IDs that are submitted? Those are like
something
the
on the
smaller
next
things
screen.
that I think would be a bit like just the actual information I'd be looking for when I'm trying to solve these things.
So one thing is
yeah.
in the artifacts area, it has a screenshot of the page on which a test failed.
Yes, that was extremely useful. I remember.
Oh, there you go.
And
Cool.
I think that's the like.
And like there are some times where we can give intelligent warnings. I think we haven't started testing reports yet. We're just starting to test those. So we can't give warnings yet. What?
So we haven't started testing what yet? You kind of faded out.
The reports themselves and the warnings that the reports give.
Okay.
So the reports can give warnings like, it looks like you're trying to do this and this probably isn't a good way to go about it. Just watch out for that, you know?
Okay.
I mean, you know, those are not enumerated yet and they're not in here yet. There will be tests for them in the future. But it does have some intelligent warnings, but some things, you know, you just can't tell why didn't a screen move on. So hopefully the screenshot will help there. For certain kinds of tests, I do want to point out, you know what, I feel like I'm moving on. Well, I'm not quite moving on. So this does a bit of that, which this happened to be written in a certain way with story tables. So there was a table here, and at the end, it gives a summary of the rows that did get used. And if you want, you can take this and you can copy it into your file, into your test file. So this presents it in a way that is, you know, copy pastable. And it says what rows were not used. So that can give you clues as to like, did I write the test wrong? Because, you know, this field wasn't found or something, right? Like, why are these variables not getting set? So that
Just
can alert
notice
you
a
to
typo.
variables, huh?
Just the typo there, but that's really small. But this is really for
Unsued
like when
rows. Ah,
when
nice.
this is when it passes, right? So
Oh, God.
Bryce made a good point. If it failed and it was like, 200 rows, it's probably about right for the Dead Broke Dads one. And it got a quarter of the way through. Do you know which particular row it tried when it failed?
Well, that's what, so this is in chronological order, right? Like this little, this report on this page, and this report on this page is in chronological order. So, sorry, alphabetical order. Chronological order here. So you'll know which ones, like which fields did get set. You'll know which question ID you were on, and you'll know which fields did get set.
So this story is per screen. Well, no, it's not actually. Does it tell you?
This is not per screen. This happens to be the test is written for each screen. Like each of these has been written for each screen, but this could be a whole set of screens. For example, like here, or you know what? Let's do a nice long one.
I think the important feedback I'm hearing Bryce give is that the main reason someone's going to look really closely at this is if it fails. So whatever, like the more specific we can be about what fails and highlight it for someone who doesn't read the reports, other than like when something fails, so they don't read it very often.
Right, and I'm saying that that's what I've tried to do, and to the extent that you can give feedback on, like your opinion on whether this information is useful. I'm trying to get your feedback. If you're not, if you feel like you're not qualified at this,
know what it will show if it failed. So that's what I think I'm not.
So this will show field code mix, blah, 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 blah. And then it will say scenario stopped here, or scenario stopped early here. And then it will still print these other things. What? It will print all these things. Go ahead. Sorry, Lily.
It's okay. Sorry, I let you finish.
I'm just saying, like, wherever the scenario stopped, if it stopped early, it will say scenario stopped early here. Like if it stopped early, like in the middle, then, only this would be logged, and it would say, only would this be logged. This will not be logged. So like, for example, it would be a
story of how to interpret it, but is it possible just to say like, it failed because we tried this and it didn't work, rather than having to read the table and see what row it stopped on? That is maybe an enhancement that could make it a little easier for someone to understand.
Well, there are warnings that should take care, like you will get a line that says, warning, you did not define the trigger variable and multiple matches were found. So we could not, this is the variable we ended up setting. And then when it says scenario stop here, you might say, oh, well, okay, that wasn't ideal then, right? So it's not just, if possible, we give a message about when something goes in an unexpected way. Like sometimes, a lot of times, it's just, this took too long to complete. We gave you the whole 2 minutes and it took too long to complete and it didn't get to the destination. So, or it will say, tried to if you press tap, if you wrote tap to continue and the user got an error, right? Then it will say the user got an error, and then you can look at your screenshot or whatever.
So maybe we just need to, maybe I don't know what all the different failure states are. So it sounds like there's an error on screen, and would that be like a jQuery error or like a DocAssembly error page?
So it's a screenshot of the screen when the error happened.
Other than the screenshot, is there a way to know that there's an error, or is it just like we're going to keep trying until there's nothing more we can click?
Other than the screenshot, I mean, the test will end if there is an actual error, like an unexpected behavior, right? Like
I'm trying to figure out what's the unexpected behavior. So is it we can't click anymore and we didn't finish the test.
There are
Um,
various unexpected behaviors. For example, you can say, I expected the page to navigate. And if the page didn't navigate, that particular scenario would stop there and say this scenario failed.
And
Right?
would it tell you
Or if you, or
how it failed? I guess that could be useful information. You know, so you don't have to read the scenario to say it stopped on this line, but if you could just see, oh, it failed because it couldn't execute this step or whatever the failure state was. That's what I'm trying to figure out. So like, what are the failure states, and then how clearly does it convey those when you're reading this?
I feel like, I feel like as is, this is really good information, and definitely like what I would, if like I can't figure out from the screenshot what's happening, the next thing I would want to look at is this whole story. But yeah, if we don't really, like, I guess we just don't have like a good example of like, oh, this is what it's going to show when it fails, then, and that's the thing that is the most important here is like, what's the exact set of information we get when it fails and what does it look like? The only other like small thing I feel I'd suggest is from like I guess this seems very useful for someone who has written the test and knows where things are, but for someone who hasn't written the test, they're going to be much more familiar with like, these are the individual screens of the interview and less about this is this like step in the test. Here was we specified a table in the test, and here was like, we had an assertion in here, and then we had one particular like try to type this thing and another assertion. Like they're not going to be as familiar with that part. And so they're more going to want to like know, like, this was a screen that was showed, this were the fields that were filled, this was a screen that was showed, these were the fields that were filled there. And I feel if sticking with that more consistent screen by screen, like, or like the like ID all the fields per screen, if that was consistently how it was, I think that would be a lot better as opposed to however it's specified in the test. If it's like ID and then field and then assertion, or like a row that fills 10 different screens.
I'm
that makes sense.
not sure what, like, how would this be different if it were to be more as you described?
Is show ifs a step in the test, or is show ifs a
Page
single?
ID.
It's a page ID, so it's a single screen, and all of those are on one screen, right?
Yep.
I think it was more later on. You had some other examples, like the rows that did get used stuff, like
So
this
is a summary of the above. It's not saying anything new. This is just, these are all the rows that got used above.
And is
so-
that the single step in the test?
Yes.
I guess the rows that did get used is one of the other things that it's unclear what it refers, like how far up it refers to. It feels like it should be another like indent.
Yeah,
I don't know.
that was a question, and I'm not sure how to do that because it is for a single step. So when you have multiple steps that do a table like this, right? If you have like a table and then you have a break in a table, let me try and find one. There we go. So like here was a step that did a table, right? And then it gets its summary of the rows that got used and the rows that didn't get used.
I see.
And here's another step that does a table. So I'm not sure how to differentiate between those. And if y'all have some ideas, I have to go soon. If y'all have some ideas on how to differentiate between those without making it seem like we're in a new scenario, how to like clearly differentiate between those steps.
Yeah,
That would be useful.
I think indentation is a good idea. I think here you're using, well, we'll stop scrolling. You're using these hyphens to separate a heading. You could use a different type of indentation, but also you could label them. So like so first of all, I think that was a really good insight. I didn't understand at first that show ifs is a page ID. So if you just said page ID : and then you could have things reference that again. So for page ID blank, these rows got used, right? So consistent labels to group them. But I think also you could use formatting. So,
but I can't do for page ID here. It is for this step because this step covers a bunch of page IDs, right? We can see a bunch of pages were set.
Okay, so that's I think that's opposite to what I understood this to mean. So what is this show
So
ifs?
this is show ifs is one page, right? That's a page ID. Button yes, no, maybe. That's another page ID. Buttons other is the next page ID.
Show ifs?
Huh?
So nothing happens on show ifs?
Yep, it just continued. there were no required fields.
I would say stuff like that. Like this is the stuff of like it's clear from like a data dump. This is all extremely useful information. I think it just needs to be formatted a bit well. So someone coming in blind, having like done other things and just straight looking at it can immediately know, oh, this is the page ID. This is what got said on that page. As opposed to having to remember the format of the output, like which is going to be, it's going to seem redundant because you're going to have page ID every other row, but it's going to be a lot easier to read.
Yeah,
Okay.
just imitate as much as you can. I think it's a good tip.
But yeah, but like overall, I don't feel like so I guess having got that answered, I don't feel like there needs to be like more information or like more specific stuff that happened in the interview that needs to be shown. I just think it needs to be like formatted a bit easier for people.
Yeah,
for,
no,
like,
but this is
yeah.
this is all good feedback. Just a sec. So add page ID and then pages where nothing was set. Try to indicate that somehow.
Well,
Like,
even rather than saying like used rows and unused rows, you can say was a set value blank to blank. And then I would just get rid of rows from the concept that's in this report.
but the thing is that like that is supposed to be able to be copy pasted. So I've gotten the generator to generate tables as much as it can. It can't generate the trigger column. There are some other things it can't do.
Before I know you have to go, since you'll be able to take whatever the feedback that you want from what I'm saying. But
I can write some more. I have some more thoughts that I can write into the PR.
Right.
So.
I mean, I
you
can't.
don't have to explain. I'll trust your opinion, like how to use what I'm saying. But you probably want to hear what I say rather than tell me what you're saying.
But you don't know. We can just continue this conversation at another time because you don't know what the situation is.
All right. I think we've run out of your time as it's 10:30. So
it is. All right. Well, I'll see y'all later. Thank you.
All right. Well, jumping back to our agenda. So I think we've hit our first point. We've resolved. I think we've gotten as far as we can on this one.
That's I think the reports and file generation stuff was what.
Oh yeah, you're right. Okay. So I don't know. I was just thinking about this some more. So there are a couple of things I put on the GitHub thread that I was wondering if you had any thoughts on. So like one was, is the difference between the profiling was the main, I really cut down a lot on the number of calls to value that we had to do. That meant the difference in your profile, or was it just unrelated? I'm wondering if you explore that at all anymore.
I don't actually know. And that's like, because that's the thing is it's still like I want to say it maybe wasn't that because like it was, if I can find that, yeah. Let me look at the issue again. It was like the value calls were taking a lot of the time. It was something like, where can I find it? Yeah, they were taking up like 90% of the entire like 10 seconds that it was spending to generate that. And afterwards it's taking like, it's still there. I don't think I actually have that in the screenshot. Before I remember it was still there, but it was like 1%. And while I'm sure like the number of values went like calls to value went down, I don't know if they went down 90%. Like that significantly. And so like, it's definitely does seem like something that could be, that definitely helped, but I don't know if I do have a feeling that it was the specific like use case that I did it on didn't have like, maybe it had a much smaller PDF or something that it wasn't taking as long to change, or maybe just a different, just something that made the PDF very quick to process. Whereas like maybe it was just that there was only like 1 or 2 PDFs. Whereas I know that the next one, the housing TRO stuff that I was testing was like nested several, like 6 or 7 different interviews were all being combined into one. And so, but yeah, I'm mostly just taking myself for not like writing down which original interview I was testing it on, because I have the bad habit of just like whatever what's the last interview I happen to see at like a stand-up, I'm gonna use that to test. And so
the profiling you did was the same profiling. It was just the particular interview you ran it on was different.
yeah.
I think,
Well, yeah.
honestly, I do know which one I was working on, which is probably the one you tested it on. But it might have been the 209A, because that was the one that, although that's a really long one, so you might not have used it for your test.
Yeah,
The
I remember
209A
it being short.
according to that change,
Mhm.
could not consistently download the last screen. Once I made the change, I could. So it did make a difference in speed.
Yeah, maybe
Okay.
that was the case. I don't. Yeah, I'm not super sure.
All right, so
Yeah, but I think the main thing I got from that anyway is that like we will likely need to test any of these performance things on multiple different interviews that are like combining AL docs in different ways, because some of them will be like, yeah, like this one that's combining several different long PDFs is going to be a lot longer on the PDF side, and other ones that is just like maybe it's just one PDF that it's not concatenating with other things, but it is checking for a lot of different like values in there. Will take a lot longer for that. So
yeah, well, I mean, I guess what insights are we getting from this? That might change some things that we do. It's like one is, is Pandoc a lot faster than any calls to LibreOffice? So should we be like preferring to use Mako to generate files and maybe come up with some LaTeX?
Pandoc. So there's a pandoc.py file. Okay, Pandoc is just a different
like a
library.
Jonathan did, but yeah, it's a library.
So
it
that's
uses LaTeX to generate files. So it's how he turns Mako into PDFs.
I see. Okay.
So that might be more reliable or more fast. I said faster. I think it should be simpler way to say it.
Okay, I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Remember a while ago, Michelle said something about, I think it's for this kind of performance issue. She said something about she compared how the core function works much faster than the document module. It sounds like she tested the same files or something, but the core is much faster than the document modules. So I'm just wondering, are the two using the same mechanism, or something is very different, or in other words, what we're experiencing as slow today, can we somehow use the core function to test the same files and to see the performance? Just to see if there's any difference.
So we are using it. That's a great question, Lily. That was one of my other thoughts too, but I'm glad you brought it up. So when we don't use AL document, when there's none of the AL document overhead, it is faster. So noticeably, although I haven't profiled it.
Yeah, that'd be useful to get something comparison, because I also remember that was a bigger issue, like, but that was also before like we like got rid of those extra calls to value that it was doing, and like Quentin added a lot of caching, which just helped on, I think, at least the idempotency stuff, because that was another one of the issues of it was like multiple screens were taking 30 seconds because every time you changed something, it would regenerate the whole thing. And it's much better about that. Yeah, but I guess, yeah, either way, that should be something we could look at, is create an equivalent AL document and just PDF concat lower level.
I think you're right that like the difference was mostly idempotency for that. And then the other, yeah, and then value would make sense because DocAssemble's built-in thing doesn't have an automated addendum kind of feature. So that would have been a performance issue there. I do wonder if there are some ways for us to think about handling the value problem that Jonathan, a different way from the way Jonathan's solving it? Because he's basically like rendering the whole stack and then seeing I don't know that much about the details of it, and then seeing like, well, what's defined and what's not. But we have a list, we could have a list of all of the variables that are in the interview, and then just, there should be another way to do
Well,
it.
but I think that's how doc assemble work. I guess there's, yeah, I guess that's like the weird part of there's not.
Can we just check for its existence in like the all variables tree? I can do it one call and then just use that potentially. Would that be?
All variables works. This was something I was reading around in the value function a lot last week, and I still don't have a good idea. Like I know it works essentially like it works exactly like that, of it grabs the whole stack and then it goes through bit by bit. And then I think if it's a object, it splits it up into the different parts, and makes sure that like the list is defined, and then that particular object is defined, and then that attribute of that object is defined. But I don't have a good idea of at least how these things function in Python, like how Python and docassemble, like how the stack looks in docassemble, because it jumps around all over the place. I have no idea what it actually looks like half the time. But yeah, maybe I guess that's the good point, is we should just check and see if all variables is faster, or if it is also just doing something similar under the hood of like going through all of its stacks and then putting them into some nice structure for you to use. Because it feels like it would have to do the same thing. I don't know why it would be doing it in a different way from value, unless there's just some weird need there. I don't know.
No, you're right. That does feel true. How else would it be implemented? Docassemble uses that for value. But maybe if we're going to go over everything, maybe it's worth doing it. But maybe there's more overhead there if we want to checking like 3 or 4 things.
Yeah, no, I do think that was actually one of my thoughts when I was reading around, is that like, if you batch this up, it would probably be a lot faster, because each individual call to value and defined, I did some refactoring that I need to make a PR upstream for, that like, so if you do show if def, it doesn't grab the stack twice, which is like the slow part, and do that. But yeah, if you could batch that over like all the variables you have, you would grab the stack once over like 10 variables. And so it would just be calling value once instead of 10 times, which would be great. So maybe all variables is a good use for that, but we just need to figure out how that would work with.
And maybe we could skip some of the things that we know we're never going to need, depending if they're that are in all variables. Like we might need to write our own version that doesn't do some of the things that.
Yeah, that would make it a bit faster.
The other thing is, sorry. The other thing is, I think I saw a issue saying that maybe, I think it's Quentin saying that you want to use the background task or something in that line.
Yeah.
Has that been put
Well,
into some
so
kind of testing or not?
Yeah. Yeah, this is
could do background tasks. The thing is, like, I think it will mess up a lot of what we've gained from doing caching. So I want to make sure it's, well, it might still be worth doing anyway, because there's always going to be some file that's too big for our performance improvements to help with.
Yeah. And we're also starting to get to the performance improvement stuff that like, maybe we can do it, maybe we won't. And then even if we can, maybe it will be like accepted upstream. And so like, yeah, like it might still be worth it to do at this point.
Well, did you had gotten relatively far with value? Like, so those seem like they're performance improvements, even if they're not enough to have a huge impact on our profile. So are those where they could be submitted?
Yeah, so I'm swapping between that and e-filing stuff. I've gotten to the point where at least it looks clean from my perspective, but I want to have like I want to actually have a good understanding of what it's doing like on each iteration, so I can be like, because this feels like it's rooting a bit deep, and like if I make a typo somewhere, then this now like breaks value somehow. And I just don't want to break value or something like that. And I don't think like the refactoring that I'm doing will break it, but just just some typo that I made could have broken it, and I don't understand enough to like currently to test it well enough to like find if I'm breaking it somewhere. So I mostly I want to like I think it's cleaned up enough, and I just need to sort of package it in a PR that I think Jonathan would be happy enough to just accept.
That's okay. And then I'm curious, like, where can we figure out this bottleneck with LibreOffice? I will say, like, even though Jonathan's version is faster, I think it's definitely, we should see where the gap is now, but it's always, so what are other things? So we figured out that using
because it was slower. It was, so there was LibreOffice's like default like command line flag of concat PDF. It was slower, but he said it does extra stuff with record appendices, which I will just take his word for it because I can't read LibreOffice macros very well. But yeah, but I think that if we could get rid of those weights, I don't know why there would be weights in a macro. Like, is it doing things
there must be some
asynchronously?
There, right?
Yeah.
Let's look at this macro again and see if we can figure it out. I do read VBA. It was one of the first languages I had to write.
Oh, is it just Visual Basic?
Yeah, it's just
okay.
Visual. This is
I guess that
definitely
makes it a little easier for me to like, if I want to figure out how to read it. I thought it was like just some weird macro script.
but I don't. I mean, I don't know if it's Visual Basic because this is obviously Open Office, but it is definitely, this is the syntax of Basic.
Gotcha.
So where are those weights? I don't think that case matters, but okay, so update all indexes. So he said this was an optional step, but it appears that it always happens.
Well, it's under the if file exists. Right.
If the file exists, that seems like it happens all the time.
Okay, fair. I don't know if I don't know if it's some other file that it's finding, but yeah, you're right. That's probably
right. It could be could mean an argument that just is a weird function call. All right, so that's one of them. So it waits till the indexes are updated. But I don't.
And there's another one after this component.
Another closing. Wait 400 milliseconds for it to close. Store to URL. Wait 400. These just don't seem like they should be needed, but I'm sure that they're there because something wasn't working all the time without them. But maybe I also noticed that he has like 3 retries for assembling the PDF.
Yes, but but those are logged, and when I was profiling, I never like saw those logs show up. So I don't know if we're actually hitting those retry limits at all. But again, I don't know. That feels like it would be. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, sorry, I was going to say maybe it'd be better to remove the weights and just use the retries, because then it would sometimes be fast instead of always being slow. But
good point. Yeah, that is actually not a bad case. Yeah.
But it also feels like maybe if we could figure out how to make this optional, we don't need it for most of our, actually no, really for any of our current files, we don't need it. So if we could make it
stuff Aubrey working on, that's a record appendix, right?
Well, okay, so
I don't understand a lot of what actual parts.
This is how I'm doing, like this essentially is a lot like what the record things. I hope so. They're not wasted. They're not duplicating any of the work I'm doing. But you can have dynamic references in a document and generate it like something like a table of contents dynamically. But I don't know if that's the right approach when we have all the information at the time we generate the document. Although on the other hand, this is for a draft, so it depends. For the record appendix, I'm just not sure how you would dynamically build that table of the documents. Because you're not inserting the document in Word. Maybe you make the cover pages dynamic. But it doesn't seem like a real pro se use case. The point is, like, it's all about editing, having something update to reflect the content that is dynamic. But if you're inserting like a repeat, you have a loop, you know exactly what the contents of the table need to be.
Yeah,
So
that makes sense.
we need to do dynamic updates. But yes, you're right. Anyway, like even if we just solved it for some of the forms, it might be worth doing if we made this option.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
At least give us a way to turn it off, even if it's still like default on or something.
Then the other question is like, well, I'm thinking about like when you have something slow, like forking a process to the operating system seems like that's just inherently not that fast. Could we just have it be waiting? And I think it can run as a daemon, so it stays on in the background. I feel like I saw that when I was researching.
Yeah. So that feels that is correct, and like it's generally slower, but I don't know if that's the like forking a process doesn't take like a it doesn't take like tenths of a second to do. It takes like a few milliseconds, maybe like a few 10 milliseconds or something, which is slow compared to like all of the other stuff you could be doing then. But I don't think that's what's causing our issues. We're not spinning off hundreds of processes. That would be what I think, like, at least my intuition is that would be like the number of processes we'd have to be spinning off to be slowing us down that much.
Okay. So, but I know that when I open LibreOffice on my desktop, it takes a fair amount of time to open up, but maybe that's not a problem when we're just using it in this way. But is it possible?
Yeah,
that
was actually, I was trying to figure that out. Like, I still can't, even on the Docker image, like the Docker Docker image, like I can't get that like macro to do what it's clearly doing when it's called in PDF concatenate. It's like I was just trying to run the same like args of LibreOffice that it's getting past, but like nothing happens. It comes up for maybe it comes up for like maybe a tenth of a second, and then it goes down immediately and nothing changes, but there's no output or anything. And I can't figure out. And so I feel like this is just I need to know LibreOffice better to know what it's trying to do. But I have a feeling because some of the arguments are like essentially headless, like run LibreOffice headless, which I assume would be what would speed it up a lot more. But yeah.
That's true. Well, this is one of the things where I don't know. Like, I know that in history, it had a whole lot of Java code in it. So it's like starting up the JVM every time. But
yeah, that's fair.
But I don't know if that was all to do with GUI code and if it's not anything to do with this part. But it wouldn't surprise me if the macros relied on some of the graphical code.
Oh, yeah, that feels right.
People use it that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no. And this is stuff that I can't, like you just inherently can't profile, because technically half of the, like some of this is, or like the most information I can get on what's taking so long is like Word to PDF and concatenate files, and everything else is just like, wait, it's spending 90% of the time waiting for LibreOffice, that LibreOffice process to do its stuff.
Okay. So we are pretty sure that it is the slowest part from the profiling that we're doing now. We do know it takes 1.6 seconds to do each file, no matter what. So that seems like it's a problem.
Unless, so I don't. This is the VBA basic stuff I don't understand. Is sub I think is that just like sub process? Like, is that VBA's equivalent of a function?
It's the end of a function.
So where do those functions actually get called is what I don't understand.
So I think there's just one, and it's okay. So this one, make property value, add property value,
There's sub, yeah, this.
Sci indexer. Okay, so this might not be called every time. You could be right.
Mhm.
So yeah. So if it's just calling particular functions,
The actual,
so subroutine is I don't really know when you would use subroutine versus, oh, here's the one we want, convert to PDF. So we should follow this through.
Can you just search those sub names and see if you can find the calling in this file?
Just look for sub again.
No, they just they convert to PDF, just the sub name, just to see if it's called within this module. And then convert to PDF, the name of the sub.
Yeah, to look for it inside the server.py, you mean?
Just here, just in this file to see if it's called in anywhere.
Well, it's definitely not in there, but hold on, let me see if I can find it.
it's, here, I have the,
Server.py, too big to index on GitHub.
that's the, I just sent in the Zoom chat, the actual, the link to the where it's calling LibreOffice. And it is calling, it's calling convert to PDF with that false and method as something that gets set earlier.
Okay.
I don't think it's, I think it's default.
Oh, so it's in pan.py. Okay, I was wrong. It's server.py.
Yeah.
No, it's too big.
Server.py is calling like the word to PDF and stuff, but
Okay. From file to file. Okay, so it's not 1600. I was wrong, unless it calls all of the functions. I don't really know the difference between, so there didn't used to be functions in VBA and subroutines were all they had, but I'm not sure why it was used both in one macro. I don't know
I'm
the
not sure.
but they essentially do the same thing.
In that case, now that we actually know that it's not always getting called, I give a little bit more credence to its LibreOffice is slow to load. Like,
Okay.
I don't know if it's the forking part of just starting a new process, but I would give some more credence to maybe just LibreOffice is slow. But that was the part that I couldn't recreate because I couldn't run this actual macro like outside, just in the command line. Anyway, I think that's just a LibreOffice, or I was calling the CLI of LibreOffice wrong somehow.
So well, wait, so like these two waits don't get called every time, but there are still two that are inside the convert to PDF subroutine.
Oh, okay, so there are, okay, there are still two.
Yeah, the weight is right. It's inside of the sub. I used to use VBA. So weight, I remember it was common because you need to give a little time for the components or whatever that was running to complete before you close it. If you don't close it, it's like well, you have to close all the objects you declared in the beginning. Otherwise, you leave things like trash behind you. So, but in order to close it cleanly, you always give a little wait time. Otherwise, you may run into issues. 400, I think it's actually not a lot. I think it's millisecond or something. So it's
Well,
really
I think it's milliseconds, yeah. So 800 is almost a whole second. And that's a lot if we're assembling 8 docx files. So that's 8 seconds before someone can do anything that's guaranteed to be there. It's not a lot for one file, but it's a lot for 8 files. I mean, I guess I should really multiply that out. 6.4 seconds. So not quite 8 seconds. But still, it feels like a fair amount to me.
Yeah.
But,
No, it definitely is.
so maybe there's a newer way to handle this where you can, I don't know, just wait the amount of time that's needed instead of, maybe this isn't the right way to place to optimize it. That's basically where I'm thinking. It's like, well, where do we start, given that there's a lot of possible places where we could think about performance?
Mhm.
Can we go back to that Word file?
The Word file?
Yeah, where you have the macro.
I
I just want to ask a question.
So you know.
Right. Okay, here. So I'm just trying to understand the difference. Let's say if I have a docx file in my folder as a template. And then when the macro runs, the value is already in that exhibit. So it only runs inside of this docx file, right? It doesn't communicate between docx and the interview file. So that's one scenario. Now in the documents, is that the same situation, or do you actually communicate between docx and your module?
Well, we're actually using DocAssemble's assembly. We're not doing our own assembly. But it actually doesn't feel like, from your profiling, Bryce, right? Like assembling the docx file is not the slow part. It's converting it to a PDF that's slow.
On this one particular interview. Like I feel like I need to at least find another interview that's like maybe 2 docx files and see if the values are like a bit more like 2 docx files, but they have like 30 something values in there, because that could be the thing that slows it down. Sorry.
So if it has the interesting thing is, I think the first round of tests that we were doing, they had addenda. So those were PDFs and there's no conversion there. But in this one, we're doing conversion to PDF. And that might've been what slowed things down. Because there are fewer PDFs and there's no addenda on the PDF at all. So that, I don't know, to me that's interesting. But I'm also curious about whether using a different converter could be a lot faster, but it would be way less capable. So, but I think that's fine for some of the simple files. The only problem is you can't run AV Word on Windows anymore, as far as I can tell. They're no longer supporting that. So it would be harder for people to validate their docx didn't use some format doesn't convert well when you use AV Word as the converter. But maybe it's not actually faster. I just remember like when I had a really slow, like a Celeron in like the early 2000s, I used AV Word and it opened in like a second, and LibreOffice took like 5 seconds to open up. So that one data point. Well, okay, maybe we had a little bit more direction. I'm interested to see if we can take out some of those weights, if it breaks stuff, or if it's just for cleanup and it's like memory management. Maybe we don't care about that. Because the whole process gets closed. But I better sign off because I have another meeting. But anyway, let me know what your thoughts are. Let's keep adding them. I'm going to add some of the stuff that I put in here onto the thread too, because that's a little bit more easy to find. But keep let me know what you think, and maybe we'll talk about it again. I won't be here next week, but I think we could have a meeting without me. So just keep me up to date on whatever.
It's on the quick thing. I said that on the previous section, there was something about breaking off all the profiling stuff I had done. Can we wrap up the profiling stuff somewhere so we could easily do it again? Is it a good enough like description in the thread? I can try and make a different put it in the documentation somewhere.
I think it'd be great to put in the documentation.
Okay.
But I don't think you have to focus on that. Let me just try doing the
I was gonna say long term, I want to try and see if I can finesse it into a way that would just be like, there's an attribute on a docassemble block that says profile true. And then when you do show values and variables, you can get that information as well. And it just automatically happens in core, but I need to figure out how that would work. But shorter term, if shorter term, I can put it in documentation for sure.
Okay. But I think I can start with what you've written out here too, and just try it. Okay, actually, I'm going to jump on a call with Jonathan, so I'll see everybody.